Hey guys. Tonight, we're hopping aboard a not-so-glamorous pirate ship somewhere in the Aegean. Sea-soaked in salt air, full of questionable characters, and definitely lacking in basic hygiene. The wind howls. The sails creak. And in the middle of all this scurvy in progress, a barefoot man in a purple robe has just been hauled aboard. Looking more like someone who took a wrong turn at a toga party than a kidnapped victim. He's oddly relaxed. There's no screaming, no threats, just a faint smile and the faint smell of grapes. You're here, of course, because you took the wrong night watch shift. The ship rocks beneath your feet, and the moonlight glints off the water like scattered coins. This is not the kind of situation you can get out of with a polite excuse. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it by you right now? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing near the mast, watching as your fellow sailors drag the stranger aboard. He doesn't resist. His hands are bound loosely, more for show than safety. And he surveys the crew with a kind of bemused curiosity, like a substitute teacher. Walking into a rowdy classroom and already knowing the lesson plan doesn't matter. The captain, grizzled and short-tempered, squints at the man. Some nobleman's brat, most like, he grumbles. We'll ransom him. Someone snorts, if he has family. Might just be a wandering drunk. That part seems accurate. The man is swaying slightly, but not from the motion of the ship. His breath smells like a vineyard in bloom, and there's a definite wine stain on his otherwise pristine robe. You, naturally, keep your distance. Pirates aren't known for their excellent judgment, and this one seems off. You notice that when he moves, the air seems to ripple just a little like heat over sand. One of the deckhands mutters something about bad luck, but is quickly silenced with a shove. Still, even among this morally flexible crew, there's a strange tension in the air. Like everyone's waiting for something, and no one knows what. The man, still unnamed, still entirely unbothered, leans against a crate, as if it's a throne. A deckhand offers him water. He refuses. A few minutes later, someone notices a small, elegant goblet in his hand. No one saw where it came from. He sips, smiles, says nothing. The ship creaks forward into deeper waters. The night stretches on, velvet and dark, as the sails billow gently above you. Hours pass. The crew grows uneasy, and still the man drinks. Historians still argue whether this tale, like so many in Greek mythologies, purely symbolic or based on some warped version of a real event. Pirates certainly prowled these waters, and Dionysus, the man we're getting to, was known for traveling in disguise. One thing's for sure, if you ever kidnap a stranger who doesn't seem remotely scared, you may want to rethink your life choices. There's an old sailor saying, well, okay, I just made it up, but go with it. Never trust a captive who acts like a guest. You notice something odd next. The ropes around his wrists. Gone, slipped off, or maybe never tied properly. He twirls the goblet between his fingers like a magician, stalling for the reveal. Still, nobody speaks. You look out at the sea, the stars shimmer. It's beautiful in a quiet, haunting way, the kind of night that makes you feel very small and very mortal. Especially when standing next to someone who may not be either of those things. A sudden gust of wind tears across the deck, and for just a second, the sails flap with a sound like 1,000 whispering voices. You shiver. Not from the cold. Down below, the hold creaks louder than usual. Someone whispers that the wine casks are leaking. Someone else says they've been refilling themselves. But you'll get to that soon enough. The man, the guest, the prisoner, the god. though no one's dared say it, yet raises his glass again. Lovely night for a transformation, he murmurs, just loud enough for you to hear. You blink. You didn't imagine that, did you? He smiles at you directly for the first time. It's not threatening, it's not kind, it's simply amused. And suddenly, you feel like a character in someone else's story. You decide to keep your distance from the strange man, but curiosity has a funny way of overriding good judgment, especially when you're trapped on a ship with 30 other bored pirates and one prisoner, who doesn't seem to know he's a prisoner. The man still hasn't said much, but the wine he drinks is becoming the most talked about thing on board. Because, here's the thing, no one knows where it's coming from. It's not from the captain's stash. It's not from the cargo hold. And when one of the younger sailors tries to sneak a look at the goblet, he comes back, pale-faced and a little dazed, like he's seen his reflection say something unkind. At first, it's just the one cup. Then the crew notices that the stranger now has a small jug beside him, shaped like a goat and constantly full. A faint aroma of crushed grapes wafts through the ship's salt-soaked planks, rich and intoxicating. One by one, the sailors start sneaking sips. The wine is strong to strong and nobody seems to mind. The man laughs softly. Drink up, he says, like a host at a country estate, offering refreshment after a long journey. You hover near the rigging, pretending to adjust a sail while watching. The more they drink, the more chaotic the ship becomes. People start dancing to no music. One man tries to wrestle a barrel and loses. Someone else begins reciting poetry about olives. Even you feel it. The air has grown heavier, warmer, like something is brewing, not a storm. Exactly, but something deeper, thicker, mythical almost. You notice that the vines are back. Yes, vines. Green tendrils, curling from beneath the deck boards and climbing the mast like they've got business to attend to. At first, they look like stray rope. But then a leaf unfurls, lush, glossy, thing, and you realize they're growing, rapidly. One wraps around a cannon, like a cat curling around a favorite leg. Now the crew is laughing, shouting, drinking more. A barrel breaks open, and surprise, it's full of wine. But not the cheap kind pirates usually drink. This is rich, red, and glowing faintly, like liquid sunset. Still, no one questions it. You lean closer to a fellow crew member and murmur, "Do you think this is normal?" He laughs. Nothing's ever normal at sea. That's not comforting. Somewhere behind you, a sailor sings a song with lyrics that don't rhyme and a melody that would make a siren weep. Another attempts to juggle fish. It doesn't go well. The fish are not amused. You notice the Mantha wine pourer. The calm center of the storm is watching it all with mild interest, as if observing pigeons on a balcony. You step closer, against your better judgment. Who are you? He smiles again, doesn't answer. Instead, he tips his cup toward you, offering a drink. You hesitate. The last thing you need is to end up juggling fish with the others. But the goblet smells safe, comforting, like distant orchards and warm breezes and naps under fig trees. You almost take it. Almost. Then a thud from the helm pulls your attention. One of the sailors has collapsed, not from illness, but sleep. Deep, dreamless, snoring sleep. He's smiling in his slumber. Another soon follows. And then another. The man speaks again, softly. Sleep, or celebration. The line gets thinner with every sip. Historians still argue whether this entire episode is allegory, whether Dionysus was a metaphor for loss of control, ecstatic release, or subconscious awakening. But standing here, surrounded by grapevines, snoring pirates, and magical wine, you're not concerned with scholarly interpretations. You're just trying not to drink the juice. Suddenly, the helmsman, the only man still sober, stands up and yells, "Enough. This is no mortal." The crew, in various states of drunkenness and impromptu napping, mostly ignore him. One sailor yells back, "He's a guest." The helmsman looks at the stranger. "You, what are you?" The stranger doesn't flinch, doesn't move. He just raises his goblet again and says, "I'm thirsty." And right on cue, the clouds gather. The wind, which had been calm, now whips through the sails like a warning. Thunder rumbles in the distance. The vines grow faster, lusher, covering crates and railings, curling around boots and bottles alike. The ship begins to creak in a different way, now a deep, wooden groan, like it's not quite sure what it is anymore. You brace yourself as the rain begins. It's not normal rain. It smells like honey and summer and something ancient. Not water, but liquid that remembers rituals. Festivals, crowds screaming beneath full moons. The crew seems to welcome it, faces upturned, mouths open. You, however, pull your coat tighter and edge closer to the lifeboats. One vine gently strokes your shoulder, like a cat nudging for food. You swat it away. The stranger, still dry, still turns toward you and says, "Do you know what happens next?" You shake your head. He leans in, just enough to make your heart hiccup. Neither do they. He gestures to the crew, now fully under the wine's spell. Some are waltzing, some are asleep. One man is teaching a crab how to sword fight. The goblet tips in your direction again. This time, you walk away. The sun has not risen. But you swear the sky just flickered with something unnatural, less like dawn, more like divine mood lighting. The ship, meanwhile, is now halfway to being a vineyard. Vines wrap the rails, the mast, even the captain's hat, which he has not noticed is slowly being overtaken by a small bunch of grapes. Nobody seems concerned, except the helmsman. You're standing close enough now to see the sweat on his brow, not from fear of the storm, but from the weight of realizing he might have accidentally aided in kidnapping a god, and not just any god. That god, Dionysus. You whisper the name to yourself. It feels heavy in the air, divine, dangerous, a little bit playful. The helmsman grabs the captain by the collar. "We have to let him go," he growls. "This is no ordinary man. This is Dionysus, the god of wine, madness, ecstasy, and chaos. You've brought a god onto a pirate ship." The captain, who's halfway through reciting a bawdy limerick to a crate of figs, doesn't seem especially alarmed. He shrugs. He seems harmless. Harmless is what people say before being turned into a constellation, the helmsman mutters. Historians still argue whether this story is an early morality tale, or a veiled commentary on Greek hospitality norms, or both. In the myth, the only person who gets spared is the helmsman, the one man who recognizes Dionysus and tries to do the right thing. Everyone else, well, we'll get there. You watch as the stranger finally stands. It's the first time he's really moved since boarding, and there's a sudden shift in the ship's rhythm. Even the storm seems to pause. Dionysus stretches casually. "You've been wonderful hosts," he says, addressing the crew like they're his dinner guests. Really, the dancing, top-notch. The wine appreciation, exemplary. His smile flickers. "But I'm afraid your hospitality has expired." The vines retract instantly, like startled snakes. The ship groans again, louder this time. The deck tilts beneath your feet. One sailor slips and falls directly into a barrel. He doesn't come out. Dionysus raises both arms, and suddenly the air is thick with static. Not electricity. Something older. The kind of power that sings in the bones of mountains and laughs in the folds of ocean waves. The helmsman drops to his knees. "Mercy," he whispers. The rest of the crew doesn't get the memo. A few pirates rush him, perhaps to restrain, perhaps to plead, perhaps because they still don't get it. They don't make it 2 steps. From beneath Dionysus's robe, shadows spill across the deck, moving shadows. You blink. Leopards. Yes, 2 of them. Fully formed, muscular, golden-spotted leopards, standing where there definitely were no leopards a moment ago. One yawns. The other stares directly at you. Your soul briefly considers fleeing your body, but you hold your ground. Dionysus strokes one of the cats like a doting pet owner. "I never travel alone," he says. "Even gods get lonely." The crew is frozen. The storm resumes, this time in earnest. Lightning flashes. The sails whip and snap. The ship is alive, now too alive. Wood bends. Ropes untie themselves. Barrels roll against the current, uphill. Somewhere, a sailor screams that the rudder has turned to stone. Another yells, "I think the mast just blinked." It probably did. You find yourself gripping the edge of the rail, watching as reality unspools like badly wound twine. The lines between man, myth, and metaphor blur in real time. Dionysus walks across the deck effortless, barefoot, undisturbed by the chaos. He lifts his goblet for the last time. "To divine mischief," he says. The goblet vanishes. The vines surge forward again, but now with purpose. They curl around ankles, wrists they don't. Strangle, they guide. Pulling, changing, wrapping the crew like gifts that need unwrapping. One sailor starts to shimmer. Literally shimmer. His arms fuse, fingers stretch, skin smooths to sleek gray. He gasps one sand, then there's no mouth, only a You watch in stunned horror and weirdly, fascination as he flops once, then slides off the deck and into the sea with a graceful splash. The transformation has begun. You hear someone yell, "Why dolphins?" Dionysus chuckles. Could have been slugs. No one laughs, except him. The helmsman clutches the rail and shouts to you, "Jump, now." You hesitate. The deck beneath you ripples like it's made of water. Your hands are already starting to feel slicker, webbed. You leap. You hit the water with a slap. The cold slicing through your skin like a slap from the gods fitting, given the circumstances. You expect the salt to sting, for your lungs to scream, for the panic to rise. But none of that happens. Instead, you float. Weightless, warm, almost welcomed. The waves cradle you like a mother's arms, and the sea feels less like an ocean and more like an extension of someone's will. You kick upward instinctively, your hands slicing the water. Your legs follow, though they feel different, stronger, smoother. You break the surface just in time to watch the rest of the ship descend into chaos. The vessel is now unrecognizable, part barge, part tree, part living mosaic of Greek theater props and jungle flora. The sails shimmer like stage curtains in a surreal dream. The leopards, gone. Or maybe they never were. You're not sure of anything anymore, except the Mano, the god standing on deck, completely dry and completely divine. He watches the last of the crew fall to the deck in terror or rapture, and then, with a single wordless gesture, releases them to the sea. One by one, they leap, tumble, or slither overboard, their bodies twisting midair, limbs fusing, hair smoothing, mouths shrinking. Each splash is punctuated by a shimmer, like someone tossing pearls into a fountain. You look around and realize you are surrounded. Dozens of dolphins now circle the ship. Sleek, graceful creatures, with eyes that feel familiar. One of them bumps into you playfully, and you feel a jolt, not physical, but emotional. Recognition. Somewhere inside that dolphin is the sailor who once stole your boots. You look down at your own hands, or rather, where your hands used to be. Webbed. Sleek. Your fingers dissolve like mist, reshaped into fins. Your feet are already gone, replaced by a single, powerful tail. Panic flickers briefly, but then fades. Breathing is easy. Not through your nose or mouth, but through somewhere else, higher up. A new center of being. Your ears register not sound but vibration. Pulses of energy that ripple through the water like whispers. Everything is sharper now. Louder but softer. Bright but soothing. As if the entire ocean has opened itself to your senses. This is happening. You are becoming a dolphin. Historians still debate whether the pirate's transformation was punishment or mercy. Some versions say Dionysus turned them into dolphins out of wrath. Others insist it was a kind of divine second chance, a way to live freely, forever removed from the sins of piracy and plunder. Either way, it's a pretty big promotion from human cannon fodder to adorable sea creature with sonar. One school of thought suggests that dolphins, long associated with protection, guidance, and joy, were Dionysus's way of offering redemption. He could have vaporized them, sure, but he chose this. He chose this. Above, the ship creaks again. The vines withdraw. The sails vanish. And then, just like that, the ship is gone, dissolved into mist, as if it were never there. Only Dionysus remains, walking across the waves like he's late for brunch. He pauses above you, his feet not so much touching the water as being carried by it. He looks down, not with judgment, but with an amused sort of kinship. "You're welcome," he says, smiling faintly. "You'll swim better than you sailed." And then he fades, step by step, dissolving into the sea spray and starlight, gone like a dream, forgotten before breakfast. You hover in the water, stunned. All around you, the other dolphins begin to move. They circle. They click and squeak in strange, rhythmic pulses that feel like a song. You understand, somehow, that this is how they speak now. And you understand something even stranger. You can speak back. You join the chorus. It's a song of freedom, of cool waves and open currents. It's a song without lyrics, but filled with meaning. The sea is vast. And you are no longer trapped by the hard edges of a deck or the small mind of a man who follows coin over conscience. You swim forward. It's effortless, natural, exhilarating. You leap once, purely out of joy, and the stars seem to applaud. Far in the distance, a ship sails, unaware. A mortal ship, full of stories and smoke. You sense it like a shadow, passing harmlessly through your new realm. You could follow, you could warn them. But that's not your job anymore. You're not a pirate. You're not a man. You're something else, now. And the sea is calling. Hours or maybe days pass. Time isn't quite as linear when you're a dolphin. You glide through underwater forests, weaving between coral pillars and swaying kelp like you've done it your whole life. Your body knows the way. Muscle memory, except the muscles are new and somehow ancient at the same time. The other dolphins, your crewmates turned padmates, have adjusted surprisingly well. One of them, formerly the ship's cook, now uses his sonar clicks to find schools of fish with unholy accuracy. Another, previously known for falling asleep during his shifts, has become obsessed with chasing bubbles. You recognize each one, not by face, but by movement, by sound, by rhythm. Above, the surface shimmers like a mirror, waiting to be cracked. Below, the sea stretches into a velvet abyss. It's quiet here, peaceful, and yet your mind won't quite settle. You keep circling back mentally anyway to that moment on the ship, when he spoke, when he chose. Why dolphins? Of all the divine punishments in the Greek playbook, this one seems gentle. You weren't turned to stone. You weren't flung into Tartarus or bound to a mountain with vultures as roommates. You were set free. Sort of. Historians still argue whether Dionysus chose dolphins because they were sacred to him or because they symbolized playful cunning. Some say the god admired how dolphins danced through waves, defying control, refusing to be tamed. Others believe it was just ironic justice turned the pirates of the sea into permanent sea dwellers, minus the looting. You pass a shipwreck now, deep beneath the water, an old one. Maybe Minoan, maybe Phoenician nits, hard to say. But it's overgrown with coral and barnacles and memories. Inside, fish dart through forgotten treasures. Amphorae lie, cracked and moss-covered, their contents long since consumed by the ocean. You peek inside. No gold, just sand. Classic. Your reflection flickers in the surface of a bronze shield. Not a man, not even close. But the eyes are familiar. Playful, curious. Yours, you swim upward, breach once, then dive back down into cooler waters. A current catches you and pulls you effortlessly forward, like a hand on your back. You don't fight it. Not anymore. The deeper you go, the more you remember. Not just the ship and the transformation, but who Dionysus was. Not just a god of wine, but a god of wildness, of theater, of masks and revelry and madness, and maybe of mercy. You recall the look on his face, not anger, not disdain, but something like mischievous affection. He could have ended you all, snapped his fingers, and reduced your crew to sea foam and regret. But instead, he gave you a new story, and a new form to tell it with. One of your fellow dolphins squeals, nudging you toward a shimmering school of silver fish. You join the chase, feeling the electricity of life flicker through your sleek new body. This isn't just survival, it's play. Something the old you rarely had time for. You catch a fish with embarrassing clumsiness, but the pod cheers anyway. At least, that's how you interpret their clicks. It might also have been mockery. You'll take it. Later, as the sun sets above the waves, you hover near the surface, watching the sky shift from gold to plum to velvet black. Stars begin to freckle the heavens again. Familiar constellations, Orion Cassiopeia, that one that looks like a donkey if you squint. You wonder if any of them were once like you. Transformed, elevated, rewritten by the whim of a god with a sense of humor and a surplus of wine. You let out a soft whistle, long and low, and feel it ripple through the sea like a prayer. Not to be heard. Just to be, then, something new, a ship above. Smaller than the one you came from, lanterns swinging, nets trailing, crew murmuring in languages you almost recognize. One sailor points. You see his finger dip below the rail, following your arc in the water. Look, he shouts. Dolphins. You breach again, slowly, deliberately. A show, perhaps, or maybe just curiosity. A child on board gasps. She claps. You feel something warm hum through your chest. Maybe this is your new role. No longer a taker, but a guardian, a guide, a living warning and a living gift. A dolphin who was once a pirate who dared kidnap a god. Whoops. You flick your tail once, hard, and vanish beneath the surface, the ship growing smaller behind you. And somewhere, far off in the deep blue, you swear you hear the faintest echo of laughter. The days o'er, the stretch of sunrises and moonrises anyway blur. Together in your new life beneath the waves, you've settled into the rhythm of dolphinhood. The sea speaks in whispers, and you've learned to listen. Your pod roams freely now. No mast, no orders, no angry captain assigning mop duty. Just current and instinct and play. But the silence in your mind eventually gives way to questions. Who was he really? Dionysus, the stranger with the wine that never ran out. The god who looked like a lost tourist, but held the sea in his smile. So you dive deeper, not just into the sea, but into memory. Let the salt scrub the past into focus. You trace it back, past the ship, past the vines. Back to whispers you once heard in your old life. Stories, myths, theater tales, half listened to at taverns. The name Dionysus was always said with either too much reverence or not enough. He was, after all, the wild card. Historians still argue about where he came from. Some say Dionysus was born of Semele, a mortal woman, and Zeus, the king of the gods. Others claim his origin lies even older, perhaps from the east, from the mystery cults of Thrace or Phrygia. His mythology is a patchwork of borrowed tales, like a mosaic made of myths that refused to behave. But here's one version that rises from the murky depths like a memory. Semele, pregnant and glowing with divine favor, was tricked by Zeus's jealous wife to demanding to see Zeus in his full godly glory. Bad idea. Mortal bodies don't mix well with divine wattage. Semele was incinerated, tragically, but Zeus rescued the unborn Dionysus by sewing him into his thigh, because ancient Greek mythology never misses a chance to get weird. So yes, Dionysus was, in a way, born twice. First of a mortal womb, and second from a divine leg. You try to imagine the office paperwork that must have generated on Mount Olympus. Once born, baby Dionysus was spirited away for his own safety. Depending on the tale, he was raised by nymphs, satyrs, or even old Silenist, the perpetually drunk, sagely fool who may or may not have invented the dad joke. There's even a story that Zeus turned Dionysus into a goat to hide him. A literal goat. You click softly to yourself. God of wine, madness, and goat cosplay. A fellow dolphin bumps your side affectionately, clearly amused by your internal commentary. Growing up, Dionysus was never quite at home on Olympus. He was the outsider among gods, too mortal for the divine, too divine for the mortals. He wandered the earth, learned winemaking, introduced it to mankind whether as gift or curse. History still debates. But that wandering, that's what makes him different. While other gods sat atop clouds and hurled lightning bolts or manipulated human drama from a safe distance, Dionysus walked, he mingled, he got messy. He danced with mortals and cried with them. He didn't just rule over his followers, he partied with them. He was a god who showed up to the village square with a full bottle and no shoes. And it made him dangerous. Because joyreal, reckless, unfiltered joys, a kind of rebellion, especially in rigid societies with strict rules and pecking orders. And Dionysus, with his wine and theater masks and gender-fluid entourage, cracked the social order open like an amphora dropped from a balcony. He made people question things. No wonder kings feared him. You surface again, gasping not for air, but from the rush of that realization, the waves break gently over your back as you hover near a rocky shoreline. You remember now, Dionysus wasn't just the god of wine and parties. He was also the god of madness. Not just the scary kind, but the freeing kind. The madness that lets you scream in a field, or cry during a play, or dance alone until the sun comes up. He was the god of letting go. That night on the ship when the vines twisted and the wine flowed and logic fled, you saw it firsthand. He didn't punish you out of cruelty. He offered you a new shape because your old one was already broken. You were pirates, lost, dangerous. And if you're being honest, pretty bad at navigation. But dolphins. They're travelers too, just with a better moral compass. You swim further, letting the current pull you into warmer waters, the kind with sunbeams that pierce the waves like golden ribbons. It's hard to describe the texture of sunlight underwater, unless you've felt it soft, weightless, almost edible. It dances along your slick skin and makes everything glitter, even your thoughts. It's here, drifting beneath the soft surface, that you feel it, that shift in the water, like the sea is remembering something before you do. The ship, your crewmates, the god who wasn't quite done with you. Your dolphin pod glides silently, instinctively forming a loose spiral around you, as if they feel it too. The water is changing, charged with something, not threatening, not yet, but present. And then, like a dream sliding into focus, you remember the moment everything truly changed. Not the vines, not the wine, not even the leopards, impressive as they were. It was the ship. The ship itself began to change. Not sink, not splinter. Transform. You recall how the wood beneath your feet began to pulse like muscle, how the grain twisted in unfamiliar, organic patterns. The ropes turned supple, almost snake-like, and the planks, they breathed. You weren't aboard a ship anymore. You were standing on something alive. That was the moment every pirate instinct in your bones screamed, "Jump." And it was also the moment your curiosity whispered, "Stay." Historians still debate what this part of the story means. Was the ship's transformation a metaphor for a collapsing worldview, a visual pun for losing control? Or was it simply Dionysus, in his signature style, breaking all rules of physics, because why not? Whatever the reason, you were caught in it. The hull curved upward into unnatural shapes. The mast drooped like a melting candle. Grapevines wrapped the wheel and burst into bloom right there, petals opening in slow motion like time itself had gone drunk. One pirate swore he saw his childhood home carved into the ship's rail. Another claimed the deck whispered secrets in ancient languages. You're not sure if you believe them, but then again, you turned into a dolphin. Perspective shifts. Even now, gliding through the sea like it's always been your home, you can't shake that image. Wood becoming flesh. Rope slithering like vines, the familiar melting into the divine. You pass over a reef now, dotted with sea urchins and sponges. A few fish scatter at your approach, but others lingered afraid, maybe even curious. That's something Dionysus taught you. Sometimes curiosity is braver than caution. You click softly and feel your pod echo it back. You've grown close, in that wordless, underwater way. Your old roles are gone no more: cook, helmsman, or mutinous lookout. Just beings equals free. Well, mostly free. There's still the question of choice. Did Dionysus give you a gift, or did he just change your form and send you swimming without asking? Historians love that question. Philosophers too. Some argue that transformation without consent is punishment, no matter how graceful the result. Others say that when you live a life of theft, violence, and general anti-heroism, being turned into a creature of joy and playfulness is the most poetic justice imaginable. You float there, considering it. Then a wave crashes above, and the sun flickers like a blinking eye, and suddenly the moment feels ordinary again. The magic recedes. Just salt, water, motion. You spin lazily, letting yourself fall backward into the deeper blue. The world goes quiet. In the silence, you think of the helmsman. He was the only one who knew. The only one who said the name aloud, who pleaded with the captain to let Dionysus go before it was too late. The only one who understood what kind of power they were meddling with. And, in the myth, he's the only one spared. The rest become dolphins. But the helmsman, he gets to stay human. It's said Dionysus smiled at him and said, "You listened." That simple. It makes you wonder, if you'd spoken up, if you'd seen the signs earlier, would you still have legs? Would you still want them? You're not sure. Because this life, beneath the waves, with your pod and the open sea and the slow forgetting of old wrongs, it's starting to feel less like punishment and more like peace. Like being rewritten in a softer font. You're resting now, just beneath the water's surface, drifting in the hush between wave and breath. The sea cradles you like an old lullaby. The others sleep nearby, rising occasionally for a lazy breath, then curling back into the rhythm of the deep. But your mind drifts elsewhere, to the exact moment your body began to change. It didn't happen in a flash knot like a cartoon poof and your suddenly flippers and fishy joy. No, it came in layers, slow, organic, with the terrifying grace of a tide that just doesn't stop coming. You remember your fingers first, how they tingled, then stiffened, then merged. Your skin, too, pulled taut and smooth, like silk drawn over bone. Your legs fused in slow motion, bone grinding against bone in silence, until you were no longer standing but sliding, tail first into a new kind of life. And the sound, oh, the sound. Your ears didn't just hear anymore, they felt. The splash of waves became emotion. The rumble of the sea floor was a lullaby. Everything had texture, even silence. The most disorienting part? You weren't in pain. Not exactly. It was as if your body already knew what it was becoming. Like it had always harbored this alternate blueprint, waiting for divine activation. Historians and folklorists still argue whether the transformation described in the myth was intended as horror or wonder. Some versions tell it like a punishment, others like a blessing. But none of them describe the weird moments, the in-between bits, like the moment you realize your knees are gone. Or when you exhale and no air comes out your mouth, because you're breathing through your back now. That's the stuff they leave out. You flash back to your crewmates, those once hard-nosed, grumbling pirates-men who could drink 10 pints and still brawl. Now, they are beside you. Sleek, elegant creatures, darting playfully through coral tunnels and echolocating like they were born to it. It should feel absurd. It does feel absurd. But it also feels right. One of them, formerly the ship's loudest snorer, clicks toward you in a friendly spiral, then flips upside down for no reason other than joy. You follow, why not? In this form, movement is freedom. No ropes, no sails. No orders shouted from a wheezing captain, just impulse, instinct. The sweet pull of motion, like dancing with the whole ocean. Still, you remember their faces, the laces, the grizzled ones, the smirking ones, the ones missing teeth or toes, or a functioning conscience. You wonder, are those versions gone forever, or just sleeping inside these streamlined new bodies? Do dolphins dream of rigging lines? You breach for air smooth, arching, perfect. The moon catches your back like a spotlight. You dive again, laughing inside your chest, or whatever part of you still registers as chest. And then, as you drift lower, you remember the question you asked aloud, or maybe just in your head, when it first began. Why dolphins? It haunts you still. You were pirates. Thieves of the sea. You stole, you lied, you lived rough, and took what you could. You expected divine retribution to come in the form of lightning, or sea monsters, or, at the very least, a curse that made your hair fall out. But dolphins. Clever, social, joyful, graceful. Dionysus didn't just spare you, he recast you. He took a gang of half-starved, sleep-deprived degenerates and turned them into sleek, sentient symbols of playful intelligence. It's almost insulting, really. But also, oddly generous. You roll through a cluster of glowing plankton, your passage lighting them up like stars underwater. The sight is so beautiful it hurts a little. You imagine Dionysus watching from somewhere, a grape in one hand and that smirky little smile on his face, proud of his dramatic flair. You recall the old myths, how he wandered the earth disguised as a mortal, teaching kings and peasants alike to lose their rigidity, to embrace the chaos. He didn't force transformation, he invited it. But if you mocked him, if you tied him up and tried to ransom him, well, you swim deeper to the quiet place, where it's darker, cooler, still. This is where you accept it. Not because you must, but because there's nothing left to resist. The ship is gone. The man is gone. You are not gone. You are new. You are not who you were. You are something else. And perhaps, in a way, that's the most Dionysian thing of all. You're cruising through the open sea now, your pod trailing behind like echoes of a forgotten past. The waves slap gently at the surface, each one a soft punctuation mark in your new, long sentence of being. You dive, not to escape, but to explore. The world has opened up in ways you never imagined. Still, the question won't leave you alone. Why dolphins, though? You've asked it before, but now you feel it differently. Not out of confusion or frustration, but out of curiosity. The kind of curiosity that creeps in when you've made peace with the what and now ache to understand the why. Dionysus could have chosen anything. Frogs. Seagulls. Drifting miserable ghosts condemned to linger near wine-stained ships. But he didn't. He chose dolphins. Sleek, playful, smart, capable of joy, capable of community. You remember something noun, old tavern tale, half slurred by a scholar who probably should have been sleeping it off. He said dolphins were once seen as messengers between worlds, not just animals, but liminal beings, swimmers in the borders, of land and sea, of mortal and divine. Historians still argue whether dolphins were sacred before or because of Dionysus, but the Greeks clearly adored them. Sailors believed dolphins could guide ships safely, that they saved the drowning, that they laughed life, not unlike Dionysus himself. And then there's the old line in Homer, where sailors see dolphins riding the wake of a ship and shout for joy, believing it a good omen. You realize now, that was you. It's always been you. Or someone like you. Maybe that's the point. You were transformed into something other people see as hope. Let that sink in. A former pirate. A thief. A guy who once stole shoes off a priest's feet during a port brawl. Now you're a symbol of protection, of joy, of divine mercy, with a side of fish jokes. Dionysus doesn't destroy. He transforms. He riches. He reminds you that life is slippery and strange and never what it seems. You slow your pace, letting the current push you gently, and take in the world around you. Below, a swarm of jellyfish pulses like a neon dream. Above, gulls wheel lazily in the sun. Your pod starts playing a game, some kind of improvised tag involving leaps and tail flicks. You can't help but join, spinning upward into a perfect breach and landing with a splash so satisfying it feels like punctuation. And maybe that's the final answer to the question. Why dolphins? Because you were never meant to stay what you were. You were always meant to move, to evolve, to follow the current, not resist it. You remember how Dionysus looked at you not with hatred, not even disappointment, but like someone watching a caterpillar halfway into its cocoon. He didn't punish you. He revealed you. What you could be, what you might have been if you weren't so busy raiding ships and insulting gods. It's humbling, really, and just a little bit funny. You, once feared on the sea, are now beloved. Sailors cheer when they see you. Children point. Poets write sonnets about you leaping in twilight. No one sings songs about Steve the pirate who took hostages and forgot to untie the rowboat. But dolphins. They get carved into temples. You wonder if Dionysus knew that. Of course he did. He always knows the ending before the play begins. You roll once more, letting the sea cradle your curved back. You feel light, unburdened. Not just by your transformation, but by the realization that you're not doomed. You're redeemed. You are the punchline of a divine jocund, the proof that laughter and mercy can come from the same place. Not all gods give second chances, but the ones who carry wine and wear ivy crowns just might. You're moving through quieter waters now, where the blue turns deep and slow, like a lullaby stretching across the ocean floor. The chaos of the storm, the madness of the ship, even the prickling weirdness of your transformation has mellowed into a dreamy calm. You aren't just swimming, you're floating in memory, and that memory pulls you backward, way backward. To Dionysus himself, not the robe-wearing, goblet-spinning version you met on the ship, but the earlier one, the young, wandering god, the one with dirt on his feet, a wineskin slung over his shoulder, and a reputation for appearing when least expected. Most gods were predictable. Zeus had his thunderbolts. Athena had her owls and battle plans. Apollo was all sun and poetry and passive-aggressive oracles. But Dionysus, he was different. A god who disguised himself, often not to deceive, but to explore, to meet people, to test them. Some say he walked among shepherds and beggars. Others claim he visited kings, masked as a traveling actor or a wine merchant, with suspiciously endless inventory. Historians still argue over whether Dionysus's many disguises represent humility or trickery. Was he the most down-to-earth of the gods, or the most unpredictable? Yes. That's the answer. Because Dionysus doesn't fit. Not in Olympus, not in myths, not in neat categories. He's the god of contradictions, madness and clarity, destruction and creativity, intoxication and awakening, and above all, a god of outsiders. You remember No Stories Whispered from Port to Port, how Dionysus took in those the world cast aside. Women silenced by fathers and husbands, rebels, nomads, even people who felt too much too joyful, too sad, too restless to ever really fit in. He didn't just welcome them, he made them sacred. In his rites, the Dionysian mysteries, they danced, drank, screamed into the night. They shed their names, their roles, their masks, and maybe, for the first time, felt truly themselves. You were never a follower of Dionysus before, but now, floating just beneath the tide, you wonder if he found you because you'd already slipped outside the lines. You were a pirate, yes, but also a question mark. The kind of person who stared too long at the stars and wondered if the sea had secrets it wasn't sharing. The kind of person who laughed too loudly or dreamed too vividly, or drank too deeply, not just out of thirst, but out of aching curiosity. And that might be why he spared you. Dionysus doesn't want perfection. He wants participation. He doesn't bless the polished, tidy lives. He blesses the messy ones, the ones that spill wine and weep at plays and kiss strangers and ask strange, inappropriate questions at dinner parties. You remember the way he looked at you like he knew. Not what you'd done, but who you were underneath it all. And then he gave you a new shape. Not to punish, not to erase, but to amplify. You are, in a way, more you than you've ever been. You're not the sum of your crimes. You're not even the sum of your choices. You're a ripple in a story bigger than you. And Dionysus just helped you hear your own note in the music. You breach once, joyfully, and spin midair, water scattering like stardust. Below, your pod chirps and clicks, weaving around each other like living ribbons. One clicks a pattern you recognize, a joke from your pirate days. You answer with a splash. Laughter, you realize, sounds different underwater, but it still counts. Above, the sun is setting again, painting the horizon in lavender and gold. It strikes you that the colors feel richer now, more layered, like you're seeing the world through two lenses, one human, one divine. You remember the stories. How Dionysus once descended into the underworld to rescue his mother. How he returned with her, triumphant. Not many gods go to the trouble of retrieving a mortal parent. But then again, not many gods love like Dionysus does. Fierce, messy, loyal. You're starting to understand him. And in some strange way, maybe that means you're starting to understand yourself. You dive again, deeper this time, toward the quiet hush of the deep sea, where the world holds its breath and waits for the next myth to unfold. The water is cooler down here, darker too, but not in a menacing way. It's like slipping into a dream, the kind that doesn't scare, just wraps you up and whispers, "Stay a while." You drift slowly, your pod quiet for once, letting you fall into your own rhythm. And that's when you start thinking about the rituals. The wine, the vines, the transformation, those were Dionysian miracles. But they weren't random, they were part of something bigger. Partying with a purpose. You'd always assumed Dionysus was just the god of overindulgence, a divine party planner with a flair for the dramatic. But that wasn't the whole story. His rituals, known as the Dionysian mysteries, weren't just excuses to get drunk and dance under the moonlight. They were about release. Catharsis. Letting go of the masks people wore, everyday pride, shame, roles. Reputation, and becoming something wild, primal, true. You imagine it now, a torchlit forest clearing. Music pounding like a second heartbeat. People laughing, crying, wailing, spinning, collapsing. Not for show, not for spectacle, but because they had to. Historians still argue about what really happened at those rites. Some say they were orgiastic frenzies, complete with animal sacrifices and ecstatic madness. Others claim they were symbolic reenactments, closer to immersive theater than chaos. Either way, they left an imprint so powerful that even today, you can still feel it humming through the myths. And that imprint? It's liberation. Not the kind you declare on a battlefield. The kind you whisper to yourself when no one's listening. This is who I really am. You see now why Dionysus drew such strange crowds. Why his followers were outsiders, misfits, and wanderers. His rituals gave voice to what society tried to silence. And as you glide past a sunken ruin, a tumbled temple, now colonized by sea, anemone, as you think about how many people must have stood inside it centuries ago, pouring wine and weeping with joy or sorrow, or maybe both. Because Dionysus didn't draw lines between the sacred and the silly. He blurred them. Joy was holy. Madness was divine. And storytelling? That was ritual too. You click a low sound, amused by the thought. If anyone had told you back on the ship that you'd end up a dolphin theologian, you probably would have laughed your rum-soaked lungs out. But here you are. Spiritual. Aquatic. Moderately aerodynamic. You turn toward the surface again, moving slowly now. Tracing spirals in the water like you're drawing on invisible parchment. It helps you think. You remember a story you heard once about how Dionysus invented theater, not just as entertainment, but as transformation. The stage was his sacred ground, masks were his symbols, and every actor stepping into a role was, in a way, becoming a new self. Kind of like you. Isn't that what happened on the ship? A play unfolded. You were cast whether you knew it or not. Daz the fool, the chorus, maybe even the tragic hero. Dionysus. He was director, playwright, lead actor, and divine stage manager all at once. And when the curtain fell, your body had changed, but your role had deepened. You weren't just a character anymore. You were part of the myth. You and your pod twist upward again, surfacing with gentle grace. The moon is high, and the sea reflects it perfectly, as if the sky fell flat on the water and decided to nap there. You breathe, not just because you need to, but because it feels good. One of your podmates squeaks and nudges your side, clearly encouraging you to race. You sigh dramatically because old habits die hard, then shoot forward with a burst of speed that leaves bubbles in your wake. Laughter follows. Not the sharp bark of a pirate's laugh, but something rounder, softer, surer. You laugh because this moment, the water, the moon, the myth still echoing in your bones, is exactly what it means to be alive. You are no longer pretending to be anything. You are, and somewhere maybe in a vineyard, maybe behind a stage curtain, maybe just watching from the folds of night Dionysus smiles. You're not sure how long you've been in the water anymore. It's not that time doesn't pass. It does. The moon still waxes and wanes. The sun still rises and softens, and the tides pull and return like breath. But you don't count time the same way. Not since becoming part of the sea's rhythm. And yet, one thought has started to bubble up again as you swim through a vast, silvery shoal of fish. What exactly is Dionysus, the god of? You knew the easy answers: wine, parties, madness. That's the list everyone gives when they raise their goblet too high and start quoting mythology between hiccups. But that's only the surface. He's the god of paradoxes, of liminal spaces, of things that are more than one thing at once. He's the god of masks and what hides beneath them, of wild freedom and sacred ritual, of structured chaos. It's weirdly comforting to realize that even the gods aren't tidy. Especially not this one. Historians still puzzle over Dionysus's position in the pantheon. He wasn't always included. Some claim he was a late addition to Olympus, a tagline god too unconventional for the original lineup. Others argue he was one of the oldest, so old that his roots predate the Olympians entirely. You're leaning toward the latter now. There's something ancient in him, something untamable. Even in his calm moments, like on the ship, when he barely moved, there was a coiled energy beneath it all. Like wine just before it ferments. Like laughter before it turns into screaming. That kind of tension doesn't come from a lightweight god. It comes from someone deeply essential to the human experience. Because Dionysus isn't just the god of celebration. He's the god of emotional truth. Of letting out the scream you've swallowed for years. Of breaking the plate and then laughing at the pieces. You pass a sunken statue now, half buried in sand, seaweed draped around its neck like a stolen scarf. Its face is worn, its features softened by time. But you recognize the expression, a smile that's seen too much and still chooses joy. It's him. You circle the statue once, twice, letting a trail of bubbles escape your blowhole. You don't pray, dolphins don't really do that, but you linger. Long enough for it to feel like a gesture. And then you swim on. Because Dionysus wouldn't want worship, he'd want motion. He's not a god who waits for offerings. He interrupts. He shows up in the middle of your routine and spills wine on your white tunic and says, "You're not living." Then he takes your hand, puts a crown of ivy on your head, and drags you into a party that changes your entire understanding of identity. You think about your pirate days, the structure of command, the barked orders, the constant scanning of horizons for threats, storms, or the occasional kraken. You thought you were free. But you were just in charge of your cage. Now you glide wherever the current allows. You speak in pulses and clicks and share jokes in tones too subtle for land-dwellers to catch. You're free in a way you didn't know existed, and Dionysus did that. Not to punish you, but to release you. From old names, old patterns, old selves. You chase a reflection across the waves, not because it means anything, but because it feels good. And maybe that's the point. Dionysus didn't just give you a new form. He gave you permission to feel deeply, to laugh loudly, to lose control and find something better on the other side. As night deepens, your pod gathers in a tight cluster, spiraling together in a gentle vortex of bodies and sound. It's not a strategy, not survival, just instinct, just connection. You close your eyes, such as they are, and drift into stillness. The sea, and Dionysus, wherever he is, hums back. Night has fully wrapped itself around the sea now. The sky above is a velvet dome scattered with stars, so crisp and close you'd swear you could nudge them with your nose. You float on your back well, your dolphin beckoned for a rare moment. You feel completely, exquisitely still. But stories don't stop just because you've changed shape. In fact, they often follow you more closely after you've become something interesting. You begin to remember other names, other places, other mortals who crossed Dionysus and found out just how creative he could be when disrespected. Because, here's the thing, the god may laugh, but he never forgets. Take King Pentheus, for example. He ruled Thebes and made the terrible mistake of mocking Dionysus's rites, called them nonsense, refused to honor the god, even forbade the city's women from taking part in Dionysian festivals. Big mistake, huge. Dionysus didn't smite him directly. Oh no, he invited him to watch. Disguised the king as a woman, had him sneak into the wild mountain revels where the Maenads Dionysus's frenzied female followers were dancing, laughing, singing, and generally not observing court decorum. And then, in the god's deliciously twisted style, he let Pentheus get torn apart by the very women he tried to control, including his own mother. Historians still debate whether this myth is meant to be a warning against authoritarianism, a metaphor for the dangers of repressing emotion, or simply an old-fashioned, God-inflicted, don't mess with my fanbase moment. Whatever the case, Dionysus didn't just punish Heath. Every act of divine justice came with dramatic flair and narrative structure. You know, because you were in one. Then there's the tale of the daughters of King Minyas. They refused to join the Bacchic rituals, choosing instead to stay home, weaving and gossiping like a bunch of ancient busybodies. Dionysus didn't explode their house or strike them with lightning. Nope. He made them lose their minds, slowly, beautifully. They began to hallucinate, thought their looms were writhing with ivy. Eventually, in a full frenzy, they sacrificed one of their own children, thinking it was a fawn. Then they were turned into bats. Bats. Because Dionysus always finds the poetic solution. And in all these tales, it's the same core message. You can ignore him, mock him, try to outwit him, but if you resist the call to feel, to break free, to step into your truest chaos, he'll break you in, or turn you into an animal. And if you're lucky, a cute animal. You swim slowly now, rolling the water across your back, thinking about the difference between punishment and revelation. Dionysus never punished like Zeus, with brute force. He punished with truth. He exposed people to the parts of themselves they tried hardest to bury. Their fear, their longing, their secret hunger for freedom. And once those parts came out, they couldn't be shoved back in. You realize now that being turned into a dolphin wasn't the sentence. Being a pirate was the theft, the roughness, the half-hearted cruelty you called leadership. All of that was you playing a role. An old script you recited because you thought it was the only one available. And Dionysus, he just handed you a new script. No lines, no stage directions. Just the open ocean and the freedom to improvise. You click softly to yourself, a laugh, sort of, because he's still with you. not hovering in the clouds or lurking in the waves, but in every shimmering school of fish that dances like a party, in every gust of wind that smells like wine when there's no vineyard in sight, in the hush before you breach the surface and the wild joy when you leap skyward anyway. Dionysus is not gone. He's just harder to spot when you're not looking. But you'll always recognize him now. Because once you've danced with a god, even in chains, the rhythm never leaves you. Dawn rolls in like a hush. No trumpets, no declarations, just a slow widening of light, one soft breath at a time. You rise with it, skimming the surface, catching the moment when night loosens its grip and lets the day take over. This is the gentle hour, the time for reflection. And lately, you've been thinking about the symbolism of your new form. Dolphins. It still feels surreal. Even now, after all the games and dives and slow drifting nights under the stars. Part of your old self watches from the inside, blinking in disbelief. Youth, the pirate. The lawless, salt-stained, bad decision-making human now glide through the sea like something out of a mosaic. A creature once painted on Grecian urns and carved into marble temples. A sign of joy, of freedom, of divine favor. Historians still write essays on what dolphins meant to the Greeks. They were sailors, companions, omens of good weather, protectors of the drowning. Some even believed dolphins carried souls to the underworld, gliding gently between realms. Which makes sense now, because that's what happened to you. You crossed over. Not from life to death, but from one kind of life to another. You didn't die, you were reborn. In a weirder, sleeker, better body. Dionysus didn't destroy your humanity. He remixed it. He took your capacity for mischief, your talent for movement, your addiction to novelty and reshaped it into something that couldn't carry weapons or steal cargo, but could still dance with storms and sing to the stars. And here's the beautiful irony. You were a pirate who feared nothing, respected little, and listened to no one. And now, you're a symbol of joy. Not just for yourself, but for others. People cheer when they see you. Children run along docks pointing and shouting. Sailors take your presence as a blessing. Yes, you are now a floating beacon of good fortune. You half expect Dionysus to pop out from behind a wave and shout, "Gotcha." But he doesn't. Because this isn't a joke. Well, not just a joke. It's divine irony. The kind only a god with a theater background could pull off. And maybe it means more than just you were bad, now you're better. Maybe it means that people can be more than the worst things they've done. That even pirates have a soft, echolocating soul somewhere under the grime. You dive again, this time more slowly, letting yourself sink into the quiet below. Here, the water presses gently, reminding you that nothing is ever truly still, not even peace. Another dolphin brushes past you, clicks softly a nudge of affection or memory, you're not sure which. Maybe both. You think of the others, your crewmates turned padmates. They've changed too, but not just in shape. The restlessness is gone, the tension, the suspicion in their eyes. There's a kind of harmony now that never existed back on the ship. Maybe that's the final lesson Dionysus was offering. Connection. You were pirates, each out for yourself. Now you swim together. You breathe together. You dance in spirals through moonlit waves. And somehow, that doesn't feel like a downgrade. It feels like becoming whole. Above, the sun breaks fully over the horizon, lighting the waves with a shimmering gold you didn't know water could hold. You surface. And for a long moment, you just float there. You don't need to do anything, say anything, prove anything. You just are. And that is enough. You swim toward open water one last time, the horizon unfolding like an invitation. The ocean is quiet, no storms, no transformations, No ancient gods hiding behind barrels of wine. Just the steady hum of the deep and the warmth of morning light soaking into your back. There's a rhythm to this life. Not like the jarring, shouted tempo of a pirate ship with its snapping sails and snarling orders. This is slower, deeper. A kind of heartbeat you didn't know you were missing until you lived it. You breach once, twisting into the air, then slip back down like a letter sliding into an envelope. And below, your pod follows graceful and alive, weaving through coral and kelp like dancers in a slow-motion waltz. You think, as you often do now, about how it all began. A stranger on a ship. A cup of wine that never emptied. A smile too serene for a prisoner. And then the moment you realized the ship itself was changing, not just the wood, but the story. You were no longer the author of your life. Dionysus was holding the quill, and instead of revenge, or fire, or divine fury, he wrote, Dolphins. Dolphins. You chuckle underwater, a string of bubbles rising like a shrug. You still don't fully understand it. But maybe you don't need to. Maybe that's the final mystery. Historians still argue what to call it. Justice, mercy, metaphor. You just call it true. Because you lived it. You feel the others nearby, a pulse of sonar, a shared awareness. You're not a pirate anymore. You're not even really a you in the old sense. You're part of something fluid, fast, free. You remember your old name, vaguely. It's soft now, echoed, but distant. Like something carved into wet sand that the tide has gently, finally taken. And you're okay with that? Because this name that clicks and chirps and whistles that define you now feels closer to the truth. And as for Dionysus, maybe he's watching. Maybe he's not. Maybe he already moved on to another village, another sea, another band of fools, too sure of themselves. You hope so. You hope someone else is having their worldview cracked open by a god in a robe with a leopard at his feet and a smirk that says, "Oh, you're going to learn today." And if they ask why dolphins, well, you hope they find their own answer. Because answers aren't always about logic. Sometimes they're about letting go. You dive deep again, far into the dark, where the water turns cold and the light barely reaches. It feels like the closing curtain of a long, strange play. But instead of applause, there's silence. The gentle kind, the sacred kind, the kind that says, "You've changed. You're free. You made it. Wind down." Now the sea fades to softness. The waves, slow. The light stretches long and golden. You and your pod circle gently near the surface. No rush, no destination, just the gentle dance of togetherness. The water hums around you, low and warm. The world feels farther away, softer, quieter. The sky blushes with the last brushstroke of twilight, and the stars return, one by one, like old friends, slipping into their usual places. The water beneath you is silk. Your thoughts drift like seaweed on the tide. No more questions. No more noise. Just stillness. You feel your breath settle into a rhythm, your body weightless, the last traces of your old life washed gently from memory. Nothing left to do. Nothing left to chase. Just a vast, gentle ocean that goes on forever. And you floating in it. Free,